Just one day. Anyway, so my name is Brian. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date's February 2nd, 1997. And I just want to share a couple things with you. When I got sober, I got arrested, came to in jail. I thought life was over. A few hours later, I was at an AA meeting, and someone had said, "Do you want to try this way of life for 24 hours?" And they gave me this 24-hour chip. I was in the military. They gave me this 24-hour chip. And I've been carrying this thing for 27 years. I drilled a hole through it. Anyway, I was 2 days sober, and I'm sharing step 4 with them. Doing step 4 and 5 with my sponsor. And my sponsor wasn't somebody I had to ask. It was somebody that came up to me and asked me, told me that they were going to sponsor me. They were going to help me. So 2 days sober, I'm doing step 5. I think I had the step completed by like day 4 or 5. 5 days later, I was deployed to Kuwait. I didn't see a meeting or a sponsor or an AA meeting for almost a year. That's how my first year was, okay? In the middle of the desert. So I'm just sharing it with you because I went through the steps quickly, and my sponsor got me into the solution in steps 10, 11, and 12, and meditation and prayer, and got me into the solution real quick. As soon as I came back, the first thing I did is I did another step 4 with him. Just peeled another layer of the onion. So the whole process about this is to go through these steps quickly and get living in the solution. So again, this is not your typical AA meeting. This is not a shortcut to AA or meant to replace work in the steps with the sponsor. This is a brief course in the fundamentals to be used as a supplement to add to your AA toolbox. The 12 steps of recovery always were and still are a simple spiritual program of action. If you have any questions as we go along, please write them down, and I'll have time to answer them at the end. We're going to open this up with 1 minute of just silent meditation, and we're just going to be quiet for 1 minute, and it's going to be a nice long minute. And when we're quiet for that minute, think of someone that's still someone you might know is sick and suffering, that might be in the rooms and might be out of the rooms, that doesn't have recovery. And let's take a minute and think about that, and also invite the God or your higher power, whatever you believe, into this room, wherever you're at. Okay, and we're going to take that 1 minute right now. Okay, thank you for the minute. And so this session, we're going to complete the surrender process by covering steps 1 through 3. We ask that you commit to the entire process so you can have what we have found. Remember, half measures avail us nothing. We hope you will enjoy this exciting spiritual journey. So we're only going to be using one book, and it's going to be this book here, Alcoholics Anonymous. We're going to get right into it. If you don't have a book, that's okay. Just listen. Always keep some paper close by. Never know when you're going to want to take some notes. Sometimes I also have, I always keep highlighters and a pen close by. So the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, was written in April 1939. Now let's think about that for a second. That's like 80-something years ago. But I want you to think about the society that we live in today. It's all kinds of technology and everything. Back then, we were a society of readers. Consequently, many of us don't read as much as they used to. So back then, you didn't have TV. You're lucky if you did have a TV. Everybody read. So when somebody gave you a book at a meeting, and they said, read it, you would take it home and read it. Today, we're going to read a lot from the book, or I'm going to read a lot from the book. That's our basic textbook. It's just like any other textbook, the stuff in there that we're gonna read about, we're gonna study, we're gonna read it, we're going to write, we're going to study, and we're going to apply. Reading the big book is the only way to learn from it. We hope that today you will have an experience that will encourage you to visit these pages often. It is suggested you read through these pages to discover your own personal truth. So as I'm reading through it, discover your own personal truth. If you see some truth in the stuff I'm reading, write it down. Write it down for yourself. Based on your own personal experiences with alcoholism, let's begin our spiritual journey by reading the foreword to the first edition. It's at the top of Roman numeral page 13. Again, if you don't have the book, it's okay, just listen. Roman numeral page 13 is XIII. It's one X with three I's. I'm going to read the first paragraph. It states, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. A seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. So the big book authors immediately tell us that the main purpose of this book, our textbook, is to show others precisely how we've recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. Precisely means no variation or deviation. This is a revolutionary statement because before the big book was written, there was no hope for alcoholics. Now anyone who is willing to follow the directions they have provided can recover. Now we'll read the original preamble as it appeared back then. This will start with the last line of the same page. So we just go to the bottom of the page. We are not an organization in the conventional sense of the word. There are no fees or dues whatsoever. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. We are not allied with any particular faith, sect, or denomination, nor do we oppose anyone. We simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted. So step 1 reads, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Surrender is essential in order to recover from alcoholism. The big book authors devote 51 pages of the book to the first part of the surrender process, which is to admit we have a problem. I think sometimes admitting is just the hardest part of it. The book begins by describing the physical and mental symptoms of alcoholism, and we're going to cover those in great detail. Later, the book asks us to acknowledge that we are alcoholics. Before we can do this, we need to know what an alcoholic is. Much of the doctor's opinion is based on 2 letters written by Dr. William Silkworth, who had been a physician at Towns Hospital in New York City. He had been treating alcoholics for years with very little success, until a miraculous fellowship was born. In the late 1930s, very little was known about alcoholism, but much of what the doctor wrote then is still relevant today. In the third paragraph on Roman numeral page 25, that's XXV, he described how Bill W., one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, recovered from alcoholism. Bill had once been a respected Wall Street stock analyst, but he eventually lost everything because of his drinking. It's going to start in the late 1934. I attended a patient who, though had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of the type I had come to regard as hopeless. Again, I underline that word hopeless because we talked about it earlier, about the hopeless state of mind and body. So he was hopeless. In the course of his third treatment, which means he went to the hospital 3 times, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. Today we call that step 12. This has become a basis for the rapidly growing fellowship of these men and women and their families. This man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. I personally know scores of cases with whom were of this type, with whom other methods had failed completely. Other methods have failed completely. Now I'm going to tell you my personal experiences. I've tried everything else but AA, and everything else failed. And one day when I tried this, it just started to work. So then, during his third trip to the hospital, Bill was told that alcoholism is a physical and mental illness. Dr. Silkworth explains this to us now in the second paragraph on the following page. Second paragraph. The physician, who at our request gave us his letter, has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms that we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as the mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted in life, that we were full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent. In fact, to a considerable extent with some of us. But we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may of course mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. So we're going to look at this abnormal physical response to alcohol. It's abnormal. The normal reaction to alcohol is to have 1 or 2 drinks and stop. Now, I shared earlier that I got a brother, and he can have 1 drink, 2 drinks, 3 drinks, and just completely stop. And what does he say? He goes, I'm starting to feel it. But the alcoholic's reaction is much different. We have 1 or 2 drinks just to get started. We have an abnormal reaction to alcohol. And the reason why, what happens to us, and I'm going to get into this in a minute, is once I start to drink, it sets off the craving for more. My brother doesn't have that type of craving, but I do. Dr. Sukla tells us that the average tempered drinker, a normal person, does not crave alcohol. We're going to read the first paragraph on Roman numeral page 28. That's XXVIII. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average tempered drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. You know, I was talking about this earlier about my problems pile up on me because when I'm drinking, I'm creating all this drama and I'm creating all these problems, and it's just, I'm never going to solve any of them. So we have a physical allergy to alcohol and a craving for alcohol once we start to drink. This craving never occurs in the average tempered drinker. So normal people don't crave alcohol and they don't have an obsession with it. Please keep in mind that Dr. Silkwood is talking about alcoholics when he writes this in the last paragraph on the same page. Many women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontent, unless they can again experience a sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks, which they seem others taking with impunity. Like I see my brother taking it with impunity. After they succumb to the desire again, as so many do, the phenomenon of craving develops, and they pass through a well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again, making promises, I'm not going to do that again. This is repeated over and over. Unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. A psychic change is the same thing as a spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening. Next, we're going to learn what happens to us once this psychic change or this experience has occurred, starting with the next line down. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, that very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems, he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. What are these few simple rules? They are following the directions for taking all 12 steps, which will enable you to have several spiritual experiences. These experiences will remove the mental obsession and any desire to drink. Then you will no longer be suffering from the hopeless condition of mind and body, but you will always be allergic to alcohol. Let us read more about this one symptom we have in common on the next page. That's Roman numeral XXX, 4th paragraph. All these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we suggested, may be a manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief it suggests is entire abstinence. Don't pick up the first drink. So once we pick up the first drink, it sets off the craving. And I'll just keep going and going and going and going until either I black out or something's going to happen, because I'm keep trying to satisfy this craving the more that I keep drinking. So the one symptom that we alcoholics have in common is that once we take the first drink, then we develop the phenomenon of craving, not before we drink. We are not drinking to escape. We are drinking to overcome a craving beyond our mental control. The doctor's only suggestion is not to pick up the first drink, so we don't set off the phenomenon of craving. So if you think you're craving alcohol, you are not. And most likely in early recovery, you're craving sugar from the alcohol. And you're only having a mental obsession with it. You want to relieve the mental obsession by taking the first drink. The 12 steps, as practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink. I'll read that one more time. The 12 steps, as practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink. The word expel means to force out, or to drive out, or be rejected. It's going to force the obsession out. Expel the obsession to drink. Now, that sentence is actually from the foreword to the 12 and 12. So we have a mental obsession and a physical allergy to alcohol. To make a clear distinction between alcoholic and non-alcoholic, normal people don't obsess with alcohol, and they don't have a phenomenon of craving with alcohol. So they don't obsess with it, and they don't crave it. We are mentally and physically different than normal people when it comes to alcohol. We are now going to move on to read parts of Bill's story to help you identify with the progressive nature of alcoholism. The progressive nature of alcoholism. We ask that you look for similarities rather than differences, just like you do when you come to a meeting. It was suggested to me to try to identify with the way Bill felt, the way Bill thought, and the way Bill drank. And I do that even when I go to a speaker meeting. The first 8 pages of Bill's story give an example of the problem of alcoholism. We're going to be covering 9 paragraphs in 6 pages. Remember, alcoholism is a progressive illness. Over any considerable period of time, we get worse, never better. So we're going to go to regular page 3, chapter 1, Bill's story. I'm going to start with the second paragraph. So regular page 3, chapter 1. My drinking. So these are before I start, these are paragraphs that I picked out that I related to. Look for your own truth when we're going over there and see if you can identify with what I picked out. So my drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. The remonstrances of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. There were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. So in that paragraph, I underlined serious proportions, unhappy scenes. We're going to go to page 5, 4th paragraph. We'll read about how frightened Bill has become and the promises he makes. I woke up. This had to stop. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises. But my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. So, I always ask myself when I was reading that paragraph, have I ever made promises to myself I wouldn't drink? I made promises I wasn't going to drink and drank anyway. So, back to the reading. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed, and confidence began to be replaced with cocksureness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into the cafe to telephone, and in no time I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then, and I did. Now I've had the same experience with me where I didn't even think. And next thing you know, I was drinking and I'm like, how did this even happen? And then once it started, I said, screw it, I'm just going to get drunk. Next paragraph. The remorse and horror and hopelessness. I really want to focus on that hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. So Bill promises his wife he wouldn't drink. Bill promises his wife he won't drink, but loses all control of his drinking once he starts to drink because of the craving. Have you ever chosen to stop and drink anyways? It's something to think about. Bill has powers over alcohol. In the second paragraph on page 7, Bill learns that having this self-knowledge about himself is not enough for him to stop. It relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fare forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. I went to town regular and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining morale bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. The first paragraph on the next page, page 8, Bill loses all hope in his powers over alcohol. It says, no words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I have met my match. I have been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. I like that paragraph because it really describes that hopelessness, and I can really, when I read it, I can really feel that and remind myself what that was like. So Bill's friend, Ebby, comes to visit him and carries a message. We're going to pick up the story later in step 2, but for now, let's read the last line. We're going to start the last line on page 9, which is the next page. We're just talking about this visit real quick. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. That's like the 4th or 5th time talking about the word hopeless, right? So Bill is hopeless. He's in there feeling all this loneliness and despair, self-pity. He's overwhelmed. So I can surely identify with the hopelessness of Bill's alcoholism. And alcohol was my master. I was hopeless. Let's go to chapter 2. There is a solution, page 17. We're going to read the first paragraph, and here we're given hope because we are hopeless. So the first paragraph, page 17. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. What a beautiful promise. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. So what a message of hope is that thousands of men and women who have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body, they have solved the drink problem. On the next page, in the first paragraph, the authors tell us how alcoholism destroys our lives and harms all those lives we touch. And in here is also some of our untreated alcoholism. So you could be experiencing some of the stuff I'm going to read at the end, even being sober and not applying these steps. It starts off with the illness of this sort. We have come to believe it. An illness involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him. No one is angry or hurt, but not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all those lives touched to suffer. It brings, and this is some of that untreated alcoholism, it brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. Starting with the first paragraph on page 20, 2 pages forward, we are given the purpose of this book. You may already ask yourself, why is it that all of us become so very ill from drinking? Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why In the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. Now let's go down 2 paragraphs. We're going to learn about 3 types of drinkers. I want you to think about, which one are you? Are you a real alcoholic? Are you a moderate drinker or a hard drinker? So moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have a good reason for it. I underlined good reason. Right? A moderate drinker can just give it up if he has a good reason. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have a habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficient strong reason, now I underline strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, a move, or a warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, though he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. So a moderate drinker can just give it up for a good reason, and a hard drinker has a strong reason. But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker and may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control. Just like I talked about in the doctor's opinion, losing all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Again, it's talking about, once I start to drink, I lose all control because the phenomenon of craving kicks in and I can't stop. So a real alcoholic is someone who has lost all control of his drinking once he starts to drink, just like in Bill's story. Next, we will learn where the main problem of the alcoholic centers in the last paragraph at the bottom of page 22. Next page. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. I start to react normal. We are legally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. Your own experience as an alcoholic should confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than the body. And if you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. I wrote excuses, right? Any 100 of excuses why I started. So once we take any alcohol, whatever, into our system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible to stop because of the phenomenon of craving that is beyond our mental control. Your experience as an alcoholic should abundantly confirm this. So the main problem of the alcoholic is centered in our mind. It's in our thinking. Let's learn more about our twisted thinking, starting with the second paragraph on 24. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazily and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. I'll have better control, right? There's a complete failure of a kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. Now, I like that they put that in there because I burned myself one time cooking, and I have no desire to ever do that again. The alcoholic may soon say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, so here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all, just like in Bill's story. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth, pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sakes, how did I ever get started again? Only to have this thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink. But what's the use anyhow? When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. Let's turn to page 30, chapter 3, more about alcoholism. 6 pages forward. In paragraph 1, We read about how we will never again control our drinking once we have lost control. If you are an alcoholic, powerless over alcohol, and never going to regain control, do you have a choice? Will you drink or not? It's something to think about. Also, when I read through this paragraph, I want you to take note every time the word control is written. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we are real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The definition of obsession is thoughts that outweigh all others. An obsession is a thoughts that outweigh all others. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion. The definition of delusion is to mislead the mind. So the delusion that we are like other people, or present it may be, has to be smashed. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. Let's turn to page 34. Second paragraph tells us that even though we thought we had a choice, that the craving took over and we lost the power to choose whether we will drink or not. Therefore, we must find a spiritual basis. Even though we have the desire to stop drinking, we found it impossible to stop. They also remind us again for the second time that the main problem of the alcoholic is centered in our insane thinking. It starts off with the second paragraph. For those who are unable to stop drinking or unable to drink moderately, I'll start over again. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We're assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Many of us felt we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This is a baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it, the utter inability to leave it alone no matter how great the necessity or the wish. How then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to our alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem, the mental states that precede. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree, which have brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy, are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? In the first paragraph, on 37, three pages forward, we are again reminded for the third time that the main problem of the alcoholic is centered in our thinking. It says, whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? We must see our own personal truth in our insanity in step 1, which is in our insane thinking, before we can go along with the idea of needing to be restored to sanity in step 2. Now let's have a quick review of step 1. First, we have a mental obsession with alcohol. I'm thinking about it, right? Then I relieve the obsession by taking the first drink. The first drink sets off an allergic reaction, which is the phenomenon of craving. that has me crave more. And I just keep drinking. It doesn't matter how, I just keep drinking all night long because I keep drinking to try to satisfy this craving that's never satisfied. The doctor's suggestion is not to pick up. The only suggestion that the doctor suggested is not to pick up the first drink so we don't set off the physical craving for alcohol. We're always going to be allergic to alcohol. The 12 steps as practice as a way of life will expel the mental obsession, enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. To make a clear distinction between alcoholic and non-alcoholic, normal people don't have an obsession or crave alcohol. This makes us mentally and physically different. Let's turn to page 44. It's 5 pages forward. First paragraph. Here we ask ourselves only 2 questions to decide if we're alcoholic or not. Page 44, first paragraph. In the preceding chapters, we have learned something of alcoholism. We hope we've made a clear distinction between alcoholic and non-alcoholic. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. So when I honestly want to, I just make promises I'm going to quit, I'm going to quit, and I find I cannot quit entirely. Or when drinking, I have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. So for me, it was both of them. I answered both those questions, yes. Now that we've made a clear distinction between alcoholic and non-alcoholic, we're going to look at the second half of step 1, the unmanageability. Please turn to page 52. It's 8 pages forward. Second paragraph. For symptoms of the spiritual malady, or as this paragraph describes them as the bedevilments, which means to be confused. And that's what we alcoholics suffer from all our lives, is a baffled and confused spirit. We're only going to go over these, cover these briefly. Please spend more time with these questions with your sponsor. Let's turn these statements into questions. These questions can be answered in the past tense, like when we were drinking, or in the present tense, now not drinking, suffering from unmanageable spirit because of untreated alcoholism. As I read them, answer these questions for yourself to see if you have been, or presently may be experiencing these symptoms. I will turn these statements into first person, and I will read it as it is in the book, and then I'll change it. So first I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to read it as a question in first person. So you're going to learn how to apply this into your life daily to see where you're at. All this stuff affects me on the inside. They say recovery is an inside job, right? Now I'm about to talk about this inside. So we're going to start with the third line down in the second paragraph. It starts off with, we were having trouble with personal relationships. We were having trouble with personal relationships. So I turn it into the question, and the question is, do I have troubles with my personal relationships? Do I have troubles with my personal relationship? Number 2, we couldn't control our emotional natures. The question, can I control my emotions, feelings, and self-esteem? Can I control that? 3, we are a prey of misery and depression. Am I vulnerable to misery and depression? 4, we couldn't make a living. Am I satisfied enough with making a living to keep me happy and sober? I'll read that one more time. Am I satisfied enough with making a living to keep me happy and sober? And is my pocketbook affected? 5, we had a feeling of uselessness. Do I have a feeling of uselessness, and does this affect my self-esteem? 6, we were full of fear. Am I full of fear, and does this affect my ambitions? 7, we were unhappy. Am I unhappy, and does this affect my security? 8, we couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. So do I seem unable to be of real help to others? Again, if you didn't write all the questions down, just ask me and I'll send them to you. So, do I seem unable? If you are suffering from these symptoms of the spiritual malady of a life ran on self-will that we just described, then your life is unmanageable. If you're suffering from a spiritual malady the suffering brings you to the mental obsession that leads you to the first drink. The solution is to have a spiritual experience or awakening. You are powerless over alcohol and your life is unmanageable. Then we are ready to take the first step. You are powerless over alcohol and your life is unmanageable. I'm going to ask each of you to answer a simple question. When I ask this question, I want you to think about it and answer it by yourself. So the question is, do you concede to your innermost self that you're alcoholic? Remember how we read that and it said this is the first step in recovery, to concede to my innermost self. When I look at like I'm going to my innermost self inside here, I'm kind of looking for my own truth. So when I did this earlier, we went on a room and just answered yes. Do you concede to your innermost self that you are alcoholic? I am for sure. So if you're not sure, or if you answer no to this question, please talk with the person that invited you to the meeting, or we'll talk about it after. For those that answered yes to this question, you have taken step 1. Congratulations. You have now started on the path of recovery. We commend you for admitting you have a problem. Your admission is a major accomplishment since most alcoholics live in denial that they even have a drinking problem. The first 2 steps are a conclusion of the mind. First 2 steps are a conclusion of the mind. There is no action required. Conclusion is an opinion reached after some thought. There's no action required in the first 2 steps. So now that we admitted we're powerless over alcohol, our life's unmanageable, and we're able to tap into our insane thinking and go along with the idea of being restored to sanity in step 2. And step 2 reads, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now that we admitted we're powerless, let's see what we can do to become empowered. Because if my problem is powerless, it means I don't have any power. It's going to talk about lack of power is my dilemma. But now I'm going to learn to become empowered. One day, Bill W. was sitting in the kitchen drinking as usual. And so we're going to go back to Bill's story. We're going to start on page 9. So one day, Bill W. is sitting in the kitchen drinking as usual when he gets a call from an old high school friend, Ebby T., who was sober for 2 months. So Bill invites him over to find out how he's staying sober. Let's turn to page 9 and pick up the story and see what message Ebby carried to Bill. The door opened and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table and he refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had gotten into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come, what's this all about? I inquired. He looked straight at me and simply but smilingly he said, I've got religion. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot, and now I suspect a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the boy was on fire all right, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court, persuaded the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea, psychic change or spiritual experience or spiritual awakening, and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. So the simple religious idea that Ebby carries to Bill is to have a spiritual experience or awakening. The practical program of action is the 4 spiritual activities from the Oxford group. They are belief in and surrender in steps 1, 2, and 3, moral inventory or confession of personality defects, which is sharing, which is steps 4 and 5, restitution to those harmed, which is step 9, God guidance, which is step 11, and helpfulness to others in step 12. This is taken from the foreword to the 2nd edition, Roman numeral page XVI, the bottom of the 1st paragraph. Tonight, we will be completing the surrender process by taking steps 1, 2, and 3. Ebby also tells Bill about the 4 spiritual principles of the 4 absolutes of honesty, unselfishness, purity, and love. And they use it as a means to determine between self-will and God's will. On page 11, the next page, go to the 3rd paragraph. page 11. But my friend sat before me, and he made a point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he admitted complete defeat. So Bill, he said, like myself, which means Bill admitted complete defeat too. And then we got a promise. So he admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead. What an amazing promise. Raised from the dead. Suddenly taken from a scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. So Ebby admits complete defeat. And so does Bill, right? Because he says, like myself. Move down to the last line of this page. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. Remember I talked about inside job, right? Much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasp a new soil. And when I get into step 3, I'm going to talk about the root, right? But his roots grasp a new soil. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. I underline that word prejudice. The word God still.
Hey. Hello.
We're in the middle of reading here. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. So I want you to kind of think about this for 1 second. So Ebby comes to Bill and he says, I found religion, I found God. And then Bill was like, well, my gin would last longer than his preaching. And then Ebby starts talking to him about God. And as he says right here, the word God still aroused a certain antipathy. He didn't like the idea. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, the feeling was intensified. So, I didn't like the idea. That's talking about Bill saying he didn't like the idea of God, right? He didn't like the idea of talking about God. It's right there in black and white. I didn't like the idea. I can imagine how this conversation went between Bill and Bob, right? Bill and Ebby. And Ebby's like, I found religion. And then he's just like, I don't want to hear that, right? Well, all you got to do is turn your life over to God. And Bill's probably like, I don't want to hear that either, right? Because he's saying right here, I don't like the idea. I didn't like the idea. Mine's highlighted in my book. But, you see, there's no but there. He says, I could go for such conceptions. A conception is a way in which something is understood or perceived. So he says, I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence. So you see that's capitalized, and it's a conception. And then the next one is universal mind or spirit of nature. Spirit of nature. So there's 3 conceptions he gives here that he could go for. But I resisted the thought of the czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. Scores of men who felt the same way about God, right? But I can go for other conceptions. So Bill has this problem with the God idea and tells Ebby all about it. So you can see they're probably going back and forth. We have this conversation all the time in AA meetings, right? All the time we have this conversation. But this is where it first came from, because Bill goes to Ebby and goes, no, I'm not listening. I'm not going to hear that. But he does say I can go for such conceptions. And then Ebby presents Bill with a revolutionary proposition. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? Basically, he said, why don't you choose one of those conceptions you just wrote out? Creative intelligence, universal mind, spirit of nature. And then Bill says, that statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered for many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. We got this squiggling writing here. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. So at that moment, recovery starts. Step 2 starts at the moment you become willing. Willing to believe. Not when you believe, because heck, it took me years to believe and build my faith and do all that. It was because I was willing, And I really like that, because it says, I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. I really like this whole idea that I can start on a simpler level. I don't have to believe, I don't have to go, So Bill's spiritual journey begins when he becomes willing to believe, not when he believes. We're going to go back to page 44. We agnostics, chapter 4, first paragraph. And I'm going to read that paragraph again that we read earlier. I'm going to go back to page 44. It's that first paragraph. It says, in the preceding chapters, we have learned something of alcoholism. And we hope we made a clear distinction between alcoholic and non-alcoholic. And if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer, which only a spiritual solution will conquer. We must have a spiritual transformation of heart and attitude toward life if we want to recover from alcoholism. Let's go down to the next paragraph. Again, I want you to keep in mind that we're still thinking about that whole thing, that conversation between Ebby and Bill having a problem with the God concept and all this, right? And Ebby says, you choose your own conception. And it says, to one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. We're talking about having a spiritual experience, right? If you're an atheist or agnostic, you go, I can't do that. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. Two alternatives, right? Alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis. But it isn't so difficult. About half of our original fellowship, 50%, about half of the original were exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope. We were not true alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. Perhaps it's going to be that way with you. But cheer up. Something like half of us, 50%, thought we were atheists or agnostic. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might. But the needed power wasn't there. The human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed us utterly. We can start the AA program without any specific belief, or for that matter, without any belief whatsoever. All a person needs are the willingness to believe. Let's go to the next paragraph. I love this paragraph. It says, lack of power was our dilemma. I like to think of sometimes when my cell phone's dying and I'm sitting on about 5% and lack of power is my dilemma, right? Because I got to go find a charger. Now, later on, I'm going to talk about that, about charging ourselves up by tapping into that power when we get into step 11. But I really like this. A lack of power was my dilemma. And I want to make that association with the cell phone. Because you know what? Everybody's got cell phones nowadays. And everybody freaks out when it gets down to 1 or 2%, right? So lack of power was that dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how are we to find this power? How, where, and how? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we're going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man, watch his hope rise as we discuss the alcoholic problem and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we've reopened the subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. We know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Again, I underline that word prejudice. On the next page, first paragraph, they ask us to set aside any prejudice we might have for spiritual principles and consider our own conception of God, just like what Bill said to Evie. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define, I underline that, or comprehend, and I underline that one, that power, which is God. I can't fully define or comprehend the power because it's so far beyond my mind. It is impossible to define or comprehend that power. A conception is defined as a way in which something is perceived or understood. In the next paragraph, we are asked to find a higher power of our own conception. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach to effect a contact with Him. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, I underline that. And the spirit of the universe, I underline that one. They're all capitalized. Underlying the totality of things, we began, and we got a promise here. Once we start to believe in something, right, the possible existence, we begin to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek Him. To us, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who honestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. So the authors just told us there are many other conceptions of God that we need to consider in helping us to access that power, because lack of power is our dilemma, right? So we can become empowered and make a beginning. I'm going to give you a list of 14 of them to consider. But in this chapter of We Agnostics, there's 22 of them. Actually, more than that, there's 27. There's 27 capitalized spiritual conceptions that you could use in chapter of We Agnostics. So if you've never done that, they're all capitalized. And so have some fun trying to find them all. There's 27 in there. I had a great time, great experience with it. But I'm going to give you 14 right now. And I'm just going to read them off. And I want you to think about it as I'm reading them off. So the first one is a power greater than ourselves. A power greater than ourselves. Supreme being. Creative intelligence. Universal mind. Spirit of the universe. Realm of the spirit. All powerful. I really like that one. All powerful. Guiding. Creation. Bridge of reason. Great reality. Infinite power. Infinite love. Creator. So they often use the word God for convenience rather than for any religious purpose. This is explained further in the first paragraph on the next page. I want to read that one more time. They often use the word God for convenience rather than for any religious purpose. It's going to start off with, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies too to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any, again, underline that word, prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. At the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth. I got to ask spiritual terms what they mean to me. And I could commence spiritual growth to affect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. Afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seem entirely out of reach. That was growth. But if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. We even talked about previously about it being inadequate. Right? Now it's talking about how limited it is. The authors are asking us to have an open mind and consider what those 26 capitalized spiritual terms or conceptions in this chapter honestly mean to us to help us grow spiritually as a starting point. By asking us what they mean to us, this will help us develop our own conception. The next paragraph assures us we are making a beginning by being willing to believe in our own conception in one of those 27. We need to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself. As soon as a man can say that he does believe, or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon the simple cornerstone, I underline that word, cornerstone, a wonderful, effective spiritual structure can be built. So just from that, I got that I'm going to be building this spiritual structure with somebody. And step 2 is my cornerstone to this beautiful foundation that I'm going to build. A wonderful and effective. Next line. That was great news for us. When we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes, but I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. Again, simpler, my own conception, being willing to believe, a simpler level. Besides the seemingly inability to accept much in faith, we have often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning, there's that word again, prejudice. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual references to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon become as open-minded on spiritual matters as we tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into the state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced, there's that word again, for as long as some of us were. On page 49, second paragraph, the authors are begging us to lay aside any prejudice we have even against organized religion. It starts off, we who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People have faith of a logical idea what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that many spiritual-minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought out ourselves. Next page, the third paragraph, the authors clearly state why one should have faith. On one proposition, however, these men and women strikingly agree. Every one of them has gained, I underline that word, gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. I'm going to read that one more time. Every one of them has gained access to that power and believes in a power greater than himself. And then it says, this power, right? Because they're gaining access to it and they're believing in it. It says, this power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. We're talking about the power of God, right? As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. A revolutionary change in their thinking and living, and thinking and actions. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, and we got a promise, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. On page 52, we're going to go page 52, third paragraph, 2 pages up. It is suggested that we keep an open mind. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. Once again, we need to make a decision. We have to decide whether or not we believe in a creator, a spirit of the universe, a God of our own understanding. In the second paragraph on page 53, we have to make a choice. When we become alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis. Self-imposed. I did it to myself, right? Self-imposed crisis. We could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was your choice to be? In order to recover from alcoholism, we have to find a power. But where are we going to find this power? The answer is on second, third, and fourth paragraph on page 55. On page 55, it's going to ask us 3 or 4 times to look within ourselves. It starts off with, actually, we were fooling ourselves. For deep down, I underline deep down, in every man, woman, and child is a fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things. I'm going to stop there for 1 second. A worship of other things, right? Women, money, material things, right? Worship of other things. But in some form or another, it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves, in miraculous demonstration of that power in human lives, are as fact as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup. It's already a part of us. Just as much as a feeling we had for a friend. I like to think of the feeling that we have for a friend as love, right? I could believe in love because God is love, right? Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much as fact as we were. We found the great reality, I underline that word, deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. If we can clear ground a bit, if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself. That's that third time. Search diligently within yourself. Then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. So the authors ask us again for the 7th time to sweep away any prejudice we may have, so we can have an open mind. Prejudice is defined as a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. The first 2 steps are a conclusion of the mind, opinion reached after some thought. Now the second step question. It's time to take the second step. And here's the question. Do you now believe? So do you now believe, or are you even willing to believe that there is a power greater than yourself? All you got to do is say yes or no. I know I believe. And I'm willing. I started out with that willing to believe, being willing to believe, and then it can grow from that simple start. For those that answered no, let's talk with the person that invited you to the meeting, or we'll talk about it after the meeting. But those answered yes, that you're willing to believe or you do believe, we've already completed step 2. See how quick that was? Step 1, step 2. Because I don't know exactly what time I started. But we just got maybe another 15 minutes. We'll be done with 3. So now let's move on to step 3. We're going to turn to page 60. We're going to start at the bottom of page 60. I think it's after the ABCs. 4th paragraph. It's going to start where it says the first requirement, but I'm going to read something first. Step 3 is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood it. So return our will and our lives over to the care of this power. So if I've taken the first step and learned that the main problem of the alcoholic is centered in my insane thinking and that we're powerless over alcohol, then I come to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sane thinking. But even though we may believe this power is the answer, that doesn't necessarily mean we're willing to accept this as a solution. In order to recover from alcoholism, we must make a decision to put this power to work in our lives. Let's break down the third step into simple terms. First, I make a decision. First, I make a decision to turn over my thinking. Second, I follow it through with my decision by some action. So first, I decided to come to the Zoom meeting. Second, I had to take some action to get here. Whether it was walking from the other side of the room and logging onto my laptop, I had to do some action, even if it's just pointing something on my phone. Okay, I made a decision. I'm going to go, bam. So you make a decision, you always got to follow it through with some action. So, since all action are born in thoughts, if all actions are born in thoughts, then we must first start with turning over our thinking to this power. If all action, everything you do, is all born in here. It's all born in thoughts, right? I think about it before I'm going to do it. I think about anything before I do it, even if it's a second. I think about, I wake up in the middle of the night, I got to go to the bathroom. I'm thinking about it. You start thinking about those things that you do. You think about it first. I think about getting out of bed. Am I going to make it to the bathroom? Do I got to turn the light on? Am I going to wake up too much? Can I go back to bed after? Right? I think about I got to get in my truck and drive to the store to get something. I'm always thinking about what I'm doing before all action is born in thought. So first, we're going to make it real simple. First, we're going to look at turning our thinking over to this power that I don't define or comprehend. In step 3, our will is our thoughts. Our will is our thought, and my life is nothing more than my action. So first, I'm going to turn my thinking and my actions over. So we're going to make a decision to turn our thinking and our actions over to the care of this power as we understand it. Since the main problem of the alcoholic is centered in our thinking, we're going to start by just checking our thinking or our thoughts. And it's just a simple test. Is it selfish or not? We must check our thoughts before we act on them. Think before you act. My mom used to tell me that all the time, right? Why do you act this way? Why don't you think before you act, right? She would always say things like that, right? Why don't you think before you act? And I go, I don't know, right? Think before you act. If our thoughts are good, I want you to think about this for a second. If your thoughts are good or godly, then your actions will be good. Your life will be good, and you will feel good. Think about it for a second. You do something nice for somebody else, especially with somebody you don't know. Hold the door open for an old lady. Just something gesture like that. I feel good, right? So my thinking is good. My actions are good. Life is good. I'm going to feel good. But let's flip it the other way. What if our thoughts are not good or selfish, right? Then our actions will be selfish, and our life will be run on self-will, in collision with everything and everybody. I create all kinds of drama because of my selfishness. Then I won't feel so good either. Think about when you do something real selfish and then you're like, damn, I shouldn't have done that, right? So let's see how operating on self-will keeps us separated from God in the 4th paragraph on 60. They explain that when we live on self-will, we are like actors trying to control every detail of the play. I like this whole idea of an actor. I'm the main stage character here in my show. This is my show, and I'm the main character. And so I got all these roles that I play. Now I'm going to give you an example of this, and you're all going to identify with me. The first time when I'm little growing up, I start to play a role with mom and dad. Why? Because I can get away with more with dad than I can with mom. Think about that for a minute. So when I can get away with stuff, I'm going to always ask dad, because dad's always going to let me go shoot the gun or the bow and arrow or go kill something. Or my mom's not going to let me leave the house, you know? So these certain roles that I start to play as I'm growing up. I'm that actor. I start to really get really good at getting what I want. And then when I don't get what I want, that's when I start, this is what starts to happen. People don't listen to me, right? It says the first requirement that we be convinced any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are always, underline that word, always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Even when my motives are good, I'm still in collision with something or somebody. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like the actor. I should say the alcoholic. Forget about each person. The alcoholic is like an actor. who wants to run the whole show, right, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. Right? If everyone just did what I told them to do, life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be. Now, here's some good assets. All right? It's going to mention some assets here. Our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate. I underline these. These are assets. Kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest, and self-sacrificing. Good assets to have, right? Self-sacrificing. But on the other hand, he may be mean, right? Egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. I know in my own being the actor, I could be really mean to people. You know, you get me angry, I cop a resentment, I can be really mean and do things on purpose and try to hurt people. You know, and that's all selfish and being dishonest. It says, but in most humans, we are more likely to have various traits. Now, I'm going to cover the selfishness and dishonesty and the mean and being angry a little bit later, and then also a whole lot in step 4. We will now read the next line down and learn about the characters that we, the actor, plays when things don't go our way. When we are trying to run the whole show our own way. We're being a director, not just a character. I'm directing everybody, right? Let's read what happens. What usually happens? It says, what usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. This is my stage. This is my life, right? Things aren't going very well. He begins to think that life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play doesn't suit him. Think about your own life, right? Admitting he may be somewhat at fault. He is sure other people are more to blame. So I might admit this much, that I'm at fault, but everybody else is really sure blame on everybody else because they're not listening to me. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. Self-pitying is like throwing a pity party, right? Self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Is it not evident to the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? Yeah, I let everybody know what I want, right? I let everyone know. And did not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate? I'm making everyone wish to retaliate against me, snatching all they can out of the show. Is he not even, in his best moments, a producer of confusion? You know, producer of confusion rather than harmony. Drama, creates so much drama, right? And jealousy and all that. Producer of confusion rather than harmony. Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. When I read through this paragraph, when I read through this paragraph, I change it up and I make it first person. That's just what I do. So I can really feel. I'm going to do this for a couple bits here. All right. So I'm just going to go, what usually happens? The show doesn't go off very well. I begin to think life doesn't treat me right. See, it's making this page really personal. And you tell me if you can really identify with that. I'm going to read it down real quick. All right. I decide to exert myself more. I become, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play doesn't suit me. Admitting I may be somewhat at fault, but I'm sure other people are more to blame. I call that pointing the finger, right? And when you point the finger, you got 3 more pointing back at you. I become angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is my basic trouble? Am I not really a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? I take these questions, I make them in first person, and I just ask them. I sit in meditation and ask them, right? Am I not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Am I not a victim of the delusion that I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if I only manage well? Is it not evident to the rest of the players that these are the things that I want? Do not my actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can out of the show? Am I not, even in my best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Man, I love just going through that and changing it like that. Man, it just makes it so personal. And I'm like, ooh, that is me. Ooh, you know? The first paragraph on page 62, they explain that selfishness, self-centeredness is the root. So remember I talked about the root in Bill's story, right? Now it's going to talk about the root of our troubles and blocks us off from the connection with our higher power and with each other. So if selfishness blocks me from God, it's going to block me from you too. If anger is going to block me from God, it's going to block me from you too. So all character defects stem from selfishness, such as selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, fear, resentment, and inconsiderate. So it starts off with selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. The root is selfishness, self-centeredness. And then it says, driven by 100 forms of fear. We can go back to page 52 where it talked about full of fear, right? Fear drives us. 100 forms of fear. I can't come up with 100 forms of fear, but I do have a list, right? 100 forms of fear and 100 forms of self-delusion and 100 forms of self-seeking and 100 forms of self-pity. 100, that's why there's commas there. 100 forms of all of those. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate because I'm driven by fear. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that sometime in our past we have made decisions based on self, which later places us in a position to be hurt. So I make decisions and I end up hurting myself, right? That's what it's saying. I made decisions based on self, which later placed me in a position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. The alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though we usually doesn't think so. I'm not that bad, right? Remember, we went into that denial with just alcoholism. Now I'm going to get into denial with selfishness. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of selfishness, the root. We must, or it kills us. I got to get rid of that root. God makes that possible, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Neither could we have reduced our self-centeredness, the root, much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. So I can't wish or try on my own power to reduce that. In the next paragraph, it's made clear that step 3 is the keystone in the arch of the spiritual structure we are creating, through which we pass to freedom. This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. And what they mean by that is real simple. I'm the director, right? Not only am I an actor, but I'm directing everybody on my whole play, right? That's playing God. So it says, next we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided to end this, that hereafter in this drama of life, right? This drama of life, God is going to be our director. All right? So I'm going to stop here for 1 second. God is the director, not me. I'm just the actor. The director tells the actor what to do, right? But I used to be the director and I used to tell everybody else what to do. So now I'm making a decision that God's going to be the director. I'm still going to be the actor, but now I'm going to listen to what the director's saying. He is the principal, we are his agents. Now they're referring to a principal and an agent as the same thing as a power of attorney. I want you to think about this for a minute. So my mom, before she passed away, gave me a power of attorney because she couldn't make decisions for herself. Now think about this for a minute. I go back up to that page. Top of the page says, place us in a position. We made decisions based on self, which later places us in a position to be hurt. So I don't make good decisions for myself. So I'm going to give that power of attorney over to God so God can make better decisions for me. See, it talks about that principal and the agent. He is the father. We are the children. We are his children. He is the father. We are his children. And a father protects his child, right? So I'm going to be safe and protected. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of a new and triumphant march, which we pass to freedom. Boy, that's the first time it's talking about freedom. We're talking about being free. I don't know. Most of my life, I've been a prisoner in my own self, right? I'm my worst nightmare in my own head, character assassinating myself I don't know how many times. And now it's telling me I can be free. It says, when we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Being all powerful, he provided what we need. If we get close to him, it performed his work well. So once we step aside and put our higher power, God, whatever you believe in the center, we are amazed at how much better our lives become. And then some promises will start to come true. The next line down, we have the third step promises. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs, and more become interested in seeing what we can contribute to life. What can I bring? Now we got some promises right here. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, I'm going to feel new power flow in, enjoy peace of mind. As we discovered we could face life successfully, as we become conscious of his presence, we begin to lose our fear. I begin to lose my fear, and that's some of that fear that drives me. Begin to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter we were reborn. The authors are writing about the rebirth of our thinking. We start changing the way we think by checking our thoughts. Is it selfish or not? We go from being self-directed to God-directed. The next line down, we are provided with the prayer that we can use to take the third step. For those that want to take the third step with us, you can please say this prayer to yourself, voicing it without reservation as I read through it. We were now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker, as we understood him, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. Thy power, thy love, thy way of life, may I do thy will always. So we're going to offer ourselves to this power that I don't fully define or comprehend, to build with me. We're building a spiritual structure, right? We got a foundation, we got a cornerstone, we got the keystone now. We're building a spiritual structure. So I'm going to ask this power, right? I'm going to offer myself to this power to build with me so we can build something together. It's about me and God, or me and whatever you believe in. It's not about me, God, and my sponsor, right? It's not about you and your sponsor. It's about you and God. Because that's what it says right here. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me. So you're going to build something, that spiritual structure. And then it says, relieve me of that bondage of self. The whole root that we're talking about on page 62. Relieve me of the bondage of self. Now I'm going to tell you, once we get to step 5, you're going to be relieved of that bondage of self. So we're asking God to relieve you from the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, the difficulties of that bondage of self, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. Think about that. Bear witness to those I would help. Thy power, thy love, thy way of life. For those who said the prayer out loud, you have taken step 3 and completed the surrender process. We started back at step 1. Let us finish the session by reading the next line down to find out what will happen after taking step 3. We found it very desirable to take the spiritual step with an understanding person, such as a wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor, but it's better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. Now today, this was written a long time ago. Now today we have sponsors. We got so many people we can do this third step with. All we got to do is go to a meeting and find somebody. The wording was, of course, quite optional, as long as we express the idea, voicing it without reservation. Now the wording is optional. So I tell everybody I sponsor, since you got this personal relationship that you're going to develop with God or your own conception, I want you to write up your own third step prayer. Make it personal. But it says, expressing the idea, voicing it without reservation. You got to express the idea and you got to voice it out loud. It said, this was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a great one, was felt at once. So at the bottom, I'm just going to remind you, at the bottom of 62, it stated that God is now our director. God is going to be the director, not us. A director runs the show. Remember before it says we run the show. A director runs the show. We, the actors, listen to the director for direction. God is the architect of the spiritual structure. We are the laborer. You ever hear people talking that's been sober a while and they say, chop wood and carry water? I'm just the laborer, right? God's the architect of all of this. And I just listen to God and do whatever he tells me to do, right? Does anybody have any questions? The first 3 steps. I always like to think about your experiences with step 2, your experiences with step 3. You know, step 1, I like to think of my step 1 experience is getting here. You know, my step 1 experience is getting here, having enough. My step 2 experience for me, and I'm going to share this real quickly, is that I shared earlier, I don't remember if it was on here or not, but when I got sober and I shared my 4th step when I was like 2 days sober, I did step 5. You know, the first day I met him, we did 1, 2, and 3, just like I just did now. And then the next day he said, here's the 4th step, have it done tomorrow. I'm like, what? Right? But I was like, well, I better listen to this guy. So I went to Kuwait and I was gone for like a year. No meetings, just me and the big book, no sponsor. I remember going mad at God, right? Whatever. I'm like, God, I'm mad, right? Why? I need to be at this meeting. I don't need to be out here on the other side of the country in the middle of the desert. I was mad. And I was taking it out on everybody, and I was suffering from untreated alcoholism. I am taking it out on everybody. Everybody knew I was mad, right? I'm mad, pissed off. I wake up in the morning, I'm mad, right? I want to be home at the meetings, getting this recovery stuff. But I want to share an experience. And the experience is that my step 2 experience was that I grew up religious, and I basically said I wasn't going to believe in that. And I rebelled at every bit of that. So I had this whole problem with the whole God concept, trying to believe in something. But I want to tell you that I struggled for a while. And one day I was in the middle of the desert, and I went out into the desert, took a walk at night. And I remember somebody saying something. I might have been a story I read in the back of the book, because I read those stories. That's all I could do. And I remember reading something about when in doubt, man, just get on your knees and pray. So I got on my knees in the middle of the sand, and it was grinding on my knees. It was hurting, right? And I'm on my knees, and I just said, whatever's out there, man, whatever's out there, please reveal yourself. Give me a sign, like anything. And I'm waiting, looking. It's dark out. What the hell am I going to see anyway, right? And I'm sitting out here, and I'm looking. Just give me a sign, anything. Like my ears and my eyes are open. So if you're out there, show me something. So I stay out there for like an hour. I'm hoping to find some kind of camel spider, anything. There was nothing moving, right? I got no sign. So I go back to my tent, and I'm all sad. And I'm thinking, see, there's nothing. There's nothing out there, right? So I said, well, I'm going to go out the next night. I'm going to go out one more time. So I go out the next night, and I say the same thing. If you're out there, please give me a sign. And something, my intuition, whatever it was, something told me to look up. Look straight up. And I looked straight up, and I saw the Hale-Bopp comet. It was April 1st, 1997. And it was the brightest it's ever been. It was 1,000 times, I think it was, brighter than Halley's Comet. Okay? Something told me to look up. It had been there all along. I never saw it. And I looked up, and I started to cry. Because that was the moment where I stopped trying to comprehend it in my head and accept it in my heart that there was something that I'm not going to fully define or comprehend. That was that moment where when I went from non-believing to being willing to believe. And I just wanted to share my step 2 experience, because maybe that was the whole point of me going out to Kuwait, was to come back with a higher power, you know? I just wanted to share that. Does anybody, I don't know how much time we got, but I think it's going to go on about, I don't know how long I was going for. Oh, hour and 55 minutes. Sound right? I don't know if you want, but we can end this with a prayer, and then we can answer any questions right when we're done if you want to do that. I always like to take a moment for the still sick and suffering alcoholic, and then we'll just end it with the third step prayer. Sound good? So let's take a moment here for a second.